What you all were talking about earlier with like Hillary Clinton, 2016 election, 2018 election, and like the amount of people who voted, you know, how the votes went up, how many people voted in 2018 in comparison to 2016 things.
Sure.
And I want to specifically talk about in the Black community about the way, I want to generalize for a second, even though I know it's not that great of a thing to do.
Right.
But just to talk a little bit about what I think a lot of like white liberals get mixed up about like the Black community, because I hear you all talk a lot about like the barbershop and the people who, with the New York Times article.
Right.
Interview with the Black guys in the barbershop. And
yeah, that article does a lot of work. But go ahead.
I just think that people think that if you went back to that barbershop, there would be like this great awakening of like the people would be in the barbershop would be like, yeah, I can't believe how, horrible Donald Trump is. And yeah, we need to do something about it. But I just don't, just from my experiences, I just don't see that happening because, and I'll do it for a few reasons. I'll tell you a few reasons. And,
Please.
And I could start off with like,
Go ahead.
And I would start off with like, in 2016 with Hillary Clinton running, I would say that me as a millennial, I was born in 1987. The first president that I can remember in my life is Bill Clinton. I didn't pay attention when George H.W. Bush was the president or anything. I didn't know anything about that. And
right.
My father was obviously a Democrat, so I knew Bill Clinton as the president, my very first president. And the only things that the 90s represented to me as a Black man in the United States, that the Clintons represented to me was a system of like persecution of, I don't want to use that word lightly since, what's like globally, it's much worse things happening.
Right.
But I remember the 90s as like a system of persecution with what was going on in the welfare system and the crime bill and how many Black men were being put in jail. And just, growing up, I had, on my mother's side, I have two uncles who did over 20 years in prison. I have an older cousin who did over 20 years in prison. I have two aunties who were addicted to crack cocaine and heroin for over 20 years. So, I think that a lot of people miss the emotional, like, representation that the Clintons brought when they were running, when Hillary Clinton was running, because it was I just think that the Democratic Party needs to do a lot more with the emotional appeal to Black people in general, because the policies, everybody's not like a political junkie and really knows a lot of the things that are going on when it comes to policies. And I think a lot of liberals misunderstand that a lot of Black people vote for Democrats solely because they're the party that's seen as like not racist, in comparison.
Right.
Because I think a lot of Black folks have more conservative views, even when you're talking about things like the Supreme Court and the things that we might lose, like abortion rights or equality for the LGBTQ community or gun rights. I think there are way more Black folks in this country who believe in those ideas. Like,
do you think it's also
making abortion illegal, letting you have any gun you want? I think there are more Black people who believe in those things than people think.
I think there's definitely more. I don't know what the data is, but I think there's definitely more than than people think. And
it tracks with the data that we've had on this show before of the general population that shows that there is not a constituency for fiscally conservative, socially liberal out there.
I just want to say the reason. I do think Malika's pieces are really important. But I think the reason the Wisconsin piece does some work is I think it sort of speaks to some of the things you're talking about, and it doesn't. I'll say for me, anecdotally, amongst a lot of conversations with just sort of more normal, less politically obsessive people generally, yeah, there's a huge amount of hatred of Trump, but not necessarily the same sense of total disjuncture between what's happening now and what came before, and the same level of personalized freak out about Trump that you get in more sort of, whatever, liberal educated circles. That's totally true. That tracks completely. And I also think, I mean, it would probably be helpful if people got a little bit more serious about understanding the specifics of different electorates and the diversity and differences inside them versus these sort of big broad strokes.
Yeah.
So Mo, let me ask you this. So, I mean, that being the case, that there is a portion of the African American community that it has an earned cynicism about any political party being able to delivering on whatever that promise should be, and even with an awareness of the Democratic Party is at least not actively almost like promoting its racism. How do you break through that? I mean, if there is a sense of like, and we go back to that barber shop and people are like, yeah, whatever. He's not doing anything that we didn't anticipate him doing, and he's not, we're not surprised. I mean, what? I mean,
I just believe that all goes into the, like what James just said, it's more about the general public. And I think black people suffer from the same things that the general public does. It's a misinformation. It's just not understanding the policies and the legislation, because it's like the argument that we're having with Bernie Sanders in comparison to the other candidates when it comes to reparations. Like the facts are that Bernie Sanders has been progressively pushing for black rights and justice and equality his entire almost his entire life. But when it comes down to the emotional appeal that he has to the black community, I feel like that's where people think he's lacking, because and I think it might just be a Bernie thing. He's not that. I mean, he's not as charismatic as other people are. So it's a little hard to get that emotional appeal. But like I said, I think it's just more of the educating the system. I mean, educating people about the system. And I think why the Clintons were so polarizing to black people is because that was like one of the few times that we could just see it on a daily basis. It was just like, you remember when your aunt's boyfriend was hiding in the closet because he couldn't live in the house with your auntie, and you remember, as a 10-year-old being connived out of $5-6 by your auntie. You remember these things, so it creates this emotional.
Well, I guess I understand that
push on the Clinton.
My question is how do you do the opposite? Like, what is that emotional? I mean, because I think, frankly, if you call in and you are, telling me that you're a 55-year-old woman living in the suburbs, the emotional, I think, strategy to get you to vote would be to talk about, the sort of the more discussing elements of Donald Trump.
It's a moral repugnance, right?
Yeah, and so my question to you, Mo, is what do you think, if it could be boiled down to reach that subsection of people? What is the emotional appeal that you think would be effective?
Well, I mean, I would say something that I think could be done that I think Barack Obama did a bad job at doing, is when there are these opportunities to play politics, basically, like during when we were having this national conversation about policing and black men, young black women being shot without guns and things. Even though he had a Republican Congress, he could have done things for the emotional appeal by like advocating for a national investigation into the institution of police in this country, and these things probably wouldn't have never happened. But I think constantly pushing
just
for
the idea that you're going to address
create
it.
black justice.
Use the bully pulpit.
Yes, just putting it out there over and over again that you are constantly thinking about it, because I think that's where the emotional, the unsettling comes from. Is like I think black people a lot of times feel forgotten, especially. I mean, it's like how you always talk about it's a zero-sum game at some points. Like when Barack Obama passes marriage equality, I love it, and a lot of people love it. When he passed rights when he's talking so much about women's equality in work, and he's talking about these different things that solely affect like a certain marginalized community, but at the same time you never push things that would solely affect the black community. So I think those types of things lead to the emotions being, lead to the emotional stress.
Well,
because you're not
being heard.
About.
You're not being heard at all. And I mean, I think Obama's defenders would argue, and in fact, I think I can't remember his name, professor from
Charles Kennedy.
Yes, Kennedy from Harvard came on, and I think I cannot remember the name of his book now, but Oranges. But it was his argument was, and I think there is something to this, at least as far as it goes. His argument was that Obama was very afraid to talk about the black experience in this country because he was afraid of he felt hemmed in and that he couldn't govern in that way because he would be pegged as being there just to help black people. I think sadly that a lot of the population, the white population on some level, came to that conclusion.
He just wants to help black people.
That's, I think, a lot of the data.
Yeah.
A lot of the data that we have seen, we had the asides on to talk about that book, Identity Crisis, which I think is just sort of amazing, where Barack Obama's winning the presidency for 50% of uncollege educated whites was the first time that they realized that Democrats were to the left of Republicans on race.
It was a tough deal.
And so, he was inhibited, or at least felt like he was inhibited, or supposedly felt like he was inhibited. I think there was some of that. For everything we got from him in terms of the black community was all respectability politics. It was all, you got to be your brother's keeper, and it's basically the same argument that Bill Cosby would have given essentially. And,
watch yourself, devil.
And so then the irony is, of course, that Hillary Clinton had to talk a lot more about race because, in part of the history you're talking about, in some respect, and in part because she needed to make that sell, and I think that cut against her with some of those white voters. But I think eventually, hopefully, we can get to the point where a politician will feel confident, and there'll be an electorate that has been fashioned that will we're talking and addressing those concerns, not just in the course of a candidacy, but in the course of a presidency, will be of net political value, or at least they'll perceive it to be the case. But
Well, it's hard
Appreciate the call.
because
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I see that on. I mean, you know, you obviously realize that every day in life. But you know, you when someone says something at work, and you know you don't press them because
Right.
you don't want the rest of the office to. You don't want to be that guy to the rest of the office. You know what I mean?
Right.
So things like I understand that perspective that he had, and I mean, I would expect somebody like a Bernie Sanders to definitely be able to make more progress with African American justice and equality than Barack Obama could have ever done. So I mean, I understand that point. It was just I think that he did a big disservice in the emotional appeal to the black folks for the future Democrats, not just about for himself. It was more about Democrats to come.
Right.
And
I think that's a good point.
I want to ask you all a quick question that was not related. I mean, it's kind of related, but not really. Do you all think that Barack Obama will campaign for Bernie Sanders if he wins the primary?
Oh, that's a good question.
He
I'm
wins
going
the
to let you
primary,
go, and we'll answer it. Appreciate the call.
If
Thanks, Mo.
if Bernie Sanders wins the
Right.
primary,
Thanks.
Barack Obama will campaign for him.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine that he wouldn't.
He will.
If he's the general, I think Obama's going to campaign for whoever wins the. But think
Obama's been sending. Not to Obama just undermined the Green New Deal the other day. We know Obama's politics, but that being said, he has gone out of his way on multiple occasions to express personal appreciation and like of Bernie Sanders.